This video will contain spoilers for both Demon Slayer and Castlevania the Animated Series. Also, brief spoilers for Cargo, a legitimately good zombie movie that I highly recommend. I think it's still on Netflix. Okay, so the reason this video exists is because I was writing a script about why I think the female characters in FMA are well written, and I would contrast that by talking about Nezuko. And I ended up going on such a long tangent that I eventually went f*** it and fleshed it out until I had enough material to make an entire video just about her, and why she's not even a bad character, but rather why she's not a character at all. Like most people, I started watching Demon Slayer near the start of the pandemic, and I liked it, at first, until I started to see that it falls victim to a lot of the same tropes that shonen tend to suffer from, including a female character who acts as more of an accessory to the main cast rather than being a character in her own right. I am of course referring to Nezuko. I like her design, and she does participate more in battles in later seasons, but Nezuko is not a character. We never get to see her do much outside of battles, as she spends the rest of an episode's runtime asleep in a box. Which is especially damning when you consider that she cannot talk. Yeah, just shove a piece of bamboo there. That'll keep the bitch from running her mouth. There is a plot-relevant reason for her mouth to be gagged, but if you've made the creative decision for her to be mute, then her personality needs to be shown through other means. All we learn about Nezuko is that she was selfless and nurturing towards her younger siblings before being turned into a demon, and that she's friendly, I guess? But that's only because she was hypnotized into believing that every human she sees is one of her dead family members, which is pretty f***ed up when you stop to think about it for more than 2 seconds. Imagine when Tanjiro finally has to break the news to her. That'll be a fun conversation. We do see her lose the muzzle at the end of the 3rd season, and she can now talk in 1 to 2 word sentences, but she never drops the cutesy baby girl shtick and still shows no signs of catching up to the other characters. Let's go ahead and compare Nezuko with the rest of the main cast, shall we? Tanjiro is a heroic guy who wants to save his sister above all else and shows empathy towards others, even the demons that he's slain. Inosuke strives to be the strongest warrior and constantly compares himself to others, often to his own detriment. Zenitsu is a coward who understandably wants to live to see another day and find himself a wife, all while he struggles to realize his own potential. Nezuko, does Nezuko have any goals? One could say that she wants to be human again, but Nezuko is never able to say or do anything to communicate that, so all we can do is assume that her goal aligns with Tanjiro's. Maybe being a demon is actually super dope. Maybe Nezuko loves being a demon, and those tears we saw were actually tears of joy. I'm being facetious here, but you get my point. The truth is that Nezuko can't have goals because she's no longer a person, she's a Pokemon that can be sent into battle whenever it's convenient, and then it's back into the ball she goes until it's time for members of the main cast to trot her around like a cute animal mascot whose only real purpose is to receive head pats and sell merchandise at conventions. Nezuko is essentially written into a corner in which she can't communicate with the other characters, can't act independently of the group, and has to be mind-controlled to prevent her from eating the first person she sees. In a sense, Nezuko's character was doomed from the start, because, part 2, the demons aren't sympathetic. Demons in this universe could have been written to be more like vampires with personalities intact, but instead, they're all zombies. Some of these zombies are more intelligent than others, but they are all zombies nonetheless, linked together by a hive mind. The only thing separating Nezuko from the rest is that she's being led around with a piece of flesh attached to a string. This wouldn't matter much if it weren't for the fact that the author wants us to sympathize with them, which doesn't really work because anything left of a demon's past life is simply reduced to an innate want, such as wanting a family or wanting to protect a younger sibling. And that much is only reserved for the 12 Kiseki. Any demons below that might as well be cannon fodder. An attempt is made to give each of the Upper Moon members distinct personalities, but they're still the evil equivalent of Inside Out. Even if their designs are unique, it doesn't change the fact that none of them have their own motives. There may be some infighting among them, but as demons, they all serve the interests of Muzan. Their loyalty to their creator is unwavering by default. The vampires from the animated Castlevania series still felt like people because they all had differing views and opinions on how humans should be treated and how their wars should be fought. The word of Dracula is always final, but this comes at the cost of pissing off some members of his inner circle who don't agree with his tactics. They're shown to form relationships with one another, and even some humans come to adopt their philosophy, adding another layer of complexity. This is compelling storytelling. The vampires are still an obvious threat to humanity, and being turned into one has had a damaging effect on their psyches. But much of their former selves are still intact, which influences the way each of them thinks, making them more, say it with me now, sympathetic. Comparatively, the demons in Demon Slayer are also over-the-top evil and treat each other so horribly that when they do finally get slain, all I can feel is a sense of relief. Tossing in an edgy backstory at the last minute isn't going to change that. The only demon I felt anything for during their death was the one playing the role of mother in Rui's family, because she had a moment of self-awareness during her final moments. It's a step in the right direction, but I find it odd that it was squandered on a minor side character. She had so little screen time that I'd still have no reason to care. The impression I got while watching Demon Slayer was that the author was trying to have their cake and eat it too. There's nothing inherently wrong with taking the simpler route when writing an antagonistic force. The demons don't need to be complex, but you can't then try to convince me that this, or any of the demons for that matter, are anything more than walking tropes. Leading up to his death, Dracula suddenly realizes that he's hurting his own son in a moment of lucidity, similar to an Alzheimer's patient. It's during this moment that Alucard is forced to kill his own father while he quietly resigns to his fate. The scene is tragic and heavy and leaves you with a bittersweet feeling. Sure, our heroes just saved the world, but you can't help but wonder if there was a better way, even though there realistically wasn't. Imagine how much more interesting Nezuko would be if she was aware of the fact that she's a demon and experienced violent outbursts followed by her being horrified at her own behavior. Instead, we got a brain-dead marionette with no thoughts of her own. It may seem like I'm being overly harsh, but the treatment of female characters is a consistent problem throughout Demon Slayer that doesn't stop with Nezuko. Whether it's Zenitsu's sexual harassment being used as comedic relief, the way Mitsuri is introduced to us as a pair of boobs with arms and legs. Two of the girls at the butterfly house nearly get abducted by Tengen. Tanjiro of course intervenes, but the whole situation is treated as a joke with no real consequence. Tengen's response is that he outranks everyone there and therefore can do whatever he wants. I get that this attitude towards women would still be pretty commonplace in Taisho period Japan, and the problem isn't the sexist behavior, the problem is that this behavior never gets critiqued, not even behind closed doors. How does Aoi feel about nearly being abducted by a man 3 times her size? Who cares? She's not important. It's demon slaying time. I've only watched the first couple episodes of Apothecary Diaries, but from what I've seen, it examines the sexism of Imperial China in a way that's historically accurate without degrading its own characters. One could argue that Nezuko isn't supposed to be a character because she's more of a plot device. She is a problem for Tanjiro to solve. To which I say, okay, then why is she here at all? Why not just seal her away in a tomb, Shadows of the Colossus style, until Tanjiro has defeated Muzan? All she does is sleep anyways, and then he wouldn't have to carry a heavy-ass box on his back. To which the fans would say, well, that's because the other Hashira would just kill Nezuko while he's gone, and Tanjiro would have died on several occasions if it weren't for her demon powers. Okay, fine, if Tanjiro really has no other option than to carry Nezuko on his back for however many seasons, then please, at the very least, let her keep some of her faculties when she turns into a demon. Have Nezuko be the one who has to constantly battle against her own bloodlust whenever she's awake without the use of hypnotism. That way, she carries a lot of her own weight, pun intended, with Tanjiro only taking the reins in extreme circumstances. I'm personally in favor of going the ceiling route because then, guess who could replace her? Kanao. When I first saw her during the entrance exam, I was almost certain she was going to become a main character. Instead, we get to see Kanao swing her sword a few times while trying to capture Nezuko, and she then proceeds to spend the rest of her screen time doting over the main trio while they recover from their wounds. She does get her moment to shine later in the manga, but Kanao doesn't get much development over the course of 3 entire seasons, and she would have gotten a lot more screen time had she been a part of the main cast. She's clearly on the same level as the other characters since she completed the same entrance exam as Tanjiro and Zenitsu, and because she's a pupil of Shinobu, the only decent female character in the show. She would also be less of a liability in battle because there's no risk of her going berserk. It just feels like wasted potential. As tempting as it is, it would be dishonest of me to say that Koyaharu Gotoge is a bad writer because they clearly understand their target audience. Demon Slayer is massively successful, to the point that the anime received the movie treatment after only 1 season. But I have to ask if shafting your own characters is really worth appealing to a demographic. Part of what makes the brotherly bond in FMA so compelling is that Alphonse, now without a body, constantly struggles with his own self-image and the unshakable feeling that he's less of a person. But Ed is always there to remind him that he was a person once, and for all intents and purposes, still is. Demon Slayer is supposed to be a story of an unbreakable bond between siblings, but all I see is a story of a boy and his dog. The way Nezuko is written makes everyone treat her like a pet that should either be rewarded for good behavior or be put down. And Nezuko is oblivious to this because, again, she's being mind-controlled. Come on, girl. Come on. You want a treat? You want a treat, girl? Look, it's your mother. She's still alive. Just kidding. She died back in episode 1. But you don't know that yet. There are still things to like about Demon Slayer. Gotoge is clearly a skilled manga artist with a strong understanding of character design. I think turning breathing techniques into a magic system is really f***ing cool, and I think the overall premise of Demon Slayer is a good one. But the strength of the writing is what ultimately makes or breaks a story, no matter how good the ideas are or how flashy the presentation is. Sadly, what could have been another engaging story about familial bonds prevailing under unlikely circumstances was executed very poorly. Thanks for watching. I've got other videos, you can click on them, as well as a playlist that teaches you how to draw in 30 minutes. How neat is that? Pretty neat, I would say.